What's up everybody, this is the 2023 Nissan Ariya, and this one is the all-wheel drive e-4ORCE version. And so about the Ariya here, well, I gotta say that it is really impressive looking. They really were able to truly make a concept car with the looks of this thing. It really is impressive just how bold and sleek and futuristic it looks. It really is impressive just how like impossibly thin those headlights are in the front there, and just the illuminated Nissan badge and the black shield there where a grille traditionally would be. The whole thing is just very interesting looking. It's also just the proportions are so bold and interesting. It's a little taller than like a Mach-E or something like that this competes with, and actually feels a little bigger and a little more substantial, even though this does compete with all of those crossovers, many of which do seem a little bit smaller. So it definitely has a little bit of a leg up there as well. Otherwise, coming down to the sides here, another thing that's very impressive are these bold 20-inch wheels that also look very futuristic, very cool. I also love the two-tone look you have here as an option that this one has with the black roof, and the black fender flares also look great. And then going out to the back there, again, so streamlined, so smooth, so futuristic looking. I also love the race-inspired rear spoiler there with the dual cuts in it, and just again the sleek Nissan badging spelled out there. And the whole thing just looks really impressive. I think it really stands out. It's been getting lots of looks here this week, and overall I think they really knocked the styling out of the park. The interior of the Ariya is also very futuristic and very concept car-like in here, but it's still pretty usable and functional, and so I'm really impressed with the way they designed this interior. Now keep in mind, this is a fully loaded Platinum Plus trim. This one retails for almost $63,000 fully loaded. So with that price in mind, this interior though still lives up to that price point in a lot of ways. So first off, sitting down in these seats, you have Nappa leather seats. They're also the zero gravity design that Nissan is kind of famous for, with these super comfortable seats, and I do love them. They're really, really nice. They're also heated and ventilated for these seats, and have all the usual adjustments, and they work really great. Now the only thing I will say about the ventilation is that it's buried in a sub-menu, and it takes 3 taps in the touchscreen to actually turn on your cooled seat, or your heated seat for that matter. So not the best implementation there, but you know, still just really nice. It has the cooled function because a lot of competitors like the Tesla Model Y, like the Mustang Mach-E, don't have that cooling function. So really great that it has that. The steering wheel here in the Ariya is also very futuristic looking and very cool with the flat bottom. Now some of the buttons here are a little cheap feeling, a little plasticky, but overall it still has a great 9.3 grip, nice 10 and 2 notches, and a great looking wheel. The gauges here are one of the two 12.3-inch displays you have in this thing, and it's all in one piece, and it's a really cool seamless design with that. But anyway, as far as the gauges go, there's a little bit of customization there, you know, with the different menus in the middle, but it's pretty simple and honestly not much different than what you get with analog gauges, where you just have, you know, the adjustability in the middle there, and that's about it. I wish there was more customization and, you know, different looks for the gauges whenever you're in different drive modes or something. Unfortunately, there isn't any of that, but it gives you all the basic information you want there, and you know, no real complaints otherwise. You do also have a head-up display here in these top versions as well. But coming over to the center of the dashboard here, I'm not even going to talk about the screen yet, because the thing that impresses me the most, honestly, is the climate controls here, which is all completely integrated into this piece of open pore wood, and it's really a cool design, and it actually works fairly well. Now in direct sunlight, sometimes these illuminations aren't super apparent. That's the only nitpick I can say, but otherwise it actually works really well and is just incredibly minimalistic, and just like the kind of stuff you've seen in concept cars for years, and it's never really come to fruition until now, and it's just really a wow factor here. But anyway, getting back up to this screen, I first off, on our way up, have to say I love this center mounted volume knob that is metal and feels really nice. But the screen, again, a 12.3-inch touchscreen, it's pretty good. So it runs Nissan's infotainment software they use in other models as well, and it's not the fastest. It is, I do find it loading things a little more often than some other screens from competitors, but it works pretty well. It does have wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, which is something that most of the competitors do not have, and so it's great that it does have that. And it's a pretty high resolution display and all that. My only thing I can say about it is that the glass is really thick, and so whenever I'm touching an icon, I don't really feel like I'm actually making contact with the icon because my finger is so far away from where the actual screen is. It's a really thick piece of glass. I'm not sure why. It's just a little odd, but you can get used to it, and thankfully it's not too picky with where you put your finger, so the touches always seem to respond as you would expect them to. And but otherwise, like I said, the only thing I don't like is the fact that a lot of the climate controls are buried in this screen. That's one of the sacrifices of this minimalistic look. but with an auto climate control system that like this has, you don't really mess with it too much, hopefully, and so it shouldn't be too big of an issue there. And otherwise, the navigation system will also take you to nearby chargers, and it does have a Google search function you have there, and overall a pretty good screen. Not the best out there, not as big of a wow factors like the Mach-E's giant tablet or the responsiveness of Tesla's screen or anything like that, but I love that it has a smartphone integration that Tesla doesn't have, and overall just a really nice screen. Coming down though, again, you have this wide open area here, so there's nothing really until you get to this center console here, and this area is kind of a mixed bag for me. So the cool thing about it though is it does slide forwards and backwards. That's a trick that we also have seen in the Hyundai Ioniq 5, but great to see it here in this. And you also see in the lower part of that they have a USB-C jack, a regular USB jack, and a regular power outlet, as well as a little bin here and a little thing to wrap your cords around if you'd like to keep those nice and tidy. But up top here you have more capacitive touch buttons, and these ones though do require a little bit more pressure to actually activate, and there's only a few buttons here, so not a big deal. But the one really cool party trick here is it has a power opening cubby. So you press this button and you have to hold it down the whole time, and then it comes down and opens up, and it's this really massive cubby, and that's really cool. And it's nice that it has that, because otherwise there's not much storage space here. You do have pockets in the doors that are nice and large, but then the center armrest is nice and soft, but you open that up and you just have a wireless phone charger in there, and that's basically it. So there's really not much storage. I mean, you do have a sunglasses holder up here in the roof, but if you want to keep your sunglasses in their own case, this bin's going to be your only option, and that's fine. It's fun to use it, but it's just slower than just grabbing into a manual bin. So while it's fun, I think the novelty would wear off after a while, and at least in my week of driving here, I've been like, oh, I got to sit here and hold this button down for like 5 seconds to get this thing to come out, then grab my sunglasses, and then I gotta put them on and then put this back in and close it back up. And it's not perfect. I guess you could leave it open all the time too if you wanted, but I just wish it was maybe a little faster with the integration there, but otherwise, again, a nitpick, it's still a really cool feature. I also really love when you're looking down in this area, you'll see that footwell area in the middle is illuminated there, some ambient lighting at night. You also see some illumination here in the doors, and just nice little touches there. I also really love the blue suede you have here, and the whole blue interior theme in general in this one in particular, which is an option. You don't have to get it, but it does certainly help to elevate this interior to feel more premium and feel a little more worthy of that high-end price tag. And then so otherwise you have two small little cup holders that are kind of not circular, and so not the best cup holders. One other minor nitpick is this shifter, which is really squeaky plastic, just feels cheap. And I mean, they say this one's pre-production, so maybe that'll feel nicer for a production one, but just really underwhelming there for something, again, at the $60,000 price point. Going on to the back seat here in the Ariya, it is fantastic. It is a really spacious back seat, right up there with the best in this segment, in my opinion. And so I'm 5'9", sitting behind myself. I easily have probably about 5 inches of legroom to spare. And of course, having the flat floor here for an EV means that you have, an actual usable middle seat as well. You also have dedicated air vents, heated rear seats here in this top version, as well as another USB and USB-C jack. There's a fold-down center armrest and pockets in those doors as well. And they're also treated to the wonderful views from this panoramic moonroof, which is really nice. That for one, it's pretty big. It's not as big as the Tesla or the Mach-E, but it's nice and large, and it also has a cover, which the Mach-E and the Model Y do not have, and it also opens, which neither of those vehicles offer either. So there's some key improvements here that they made that some others haven't made, and so it's really great that it has that. And then going on to the cargo space here in the Ariya, it's really nice and spacious. So you do have a nice wide space. There's some deep pockets there on both sides, and it's a pretty long space. Now the thing is, in the all-wheel drive versions, beneath the floor there, all you'll see is the subwoofer for this Bose stereo, which I'll get to in a second. And then you also, just have a few little spaces there to store your charging cables, and that's about it. If you were to go for the front-wheel drive version of the Ariya, you would have a deeper cubby there under the floor as well. Unfortunately, though, there is no frunk here in the Ariya. All you see is all the mechanicals under the hood there. So it takes the same approach as the Volkswagen ID4 with having no frunk, and that is something that the Model Y and the Mach-E and even the Ioniq 5 and the EV6 do offer with tiny ones, but the Mach-E and the Model Y ones are, a really nice large extra space, and that's something you don't get here in the Ariya. And then the last thing to mention though is this Bose stereo. It's a 10-speaker stereo. Unfortunately, it is reserved only for this top trim. The Bose and the ventilated seats are only in this top $63,000 one, basically. So not a great thing there. If you are someone looking for those two things, you're gonna have to spend top dollar for that. But the Bose stereo is fantastic. Only 10 speakers doesn't sound like a lot these days, but it really has been an impressive stereo to use this week. And I wouldn't say it's one of the best out there, but I'd say it's actually better than what like Volkswagen and Ford offer, and a few others. And so I'd say it's actually towards the top of the pack though. But let's turn it on and go for a drive. The Ariya here has a new key for Nissan, which is nice. Has a little metal trim ring on it, and just this like rougher plastic, but it's a cool look and just nice to see a new Nissan key since it's been probably at least a decade. So great to see that. It is of course keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the power button, and it turns right on. All right, so setting off here in the Ariya. So the first thing you notice about it, well, I think the first thing that I noticed is the extremely long brake pedal travel, which is not something I usually comment on, but I gotta say in modern vehicles, this is by far the longest brake pedal travel I've used in many years. It is really strange, and so it means that you really have to put a lot of action into your leg to get the kind of braking force that you're looking for out of it. And it's actually so long, in fact, that whenever I went to start up the vehicle a few times, my foot hadn't already gone down to the bottom of the pedal whenever I hit the power button. So it actually had me hit the power button twice to actually turn the vehicle on. It was like going into accessory mode, and I was wondering why it wouldn't go into drive, and it's because I hadn't put my foot all the way down and given it enough time for my feet to reach all the way to the bottom of the brake pedal there in order to actually turn this vehicle on. It's really bizarre. I don't know why they chose to do that. And so, I mean, one nice thing about it though is it does mean that the braking is pretty smooth, but it's still actually not perfect. So even with all this travel, there are some times where it's not perfectly blended for when you're going from the regenerative braking to actual friction brakes, and it's not seamless and doesn't do as well with blending those two as other vehicles. So there are some times where I have like no braking, and then all of a sudden it starts hitting me hard with the brakes in that last like 2/10 of pedal travel, and it's just that's when the friction brakes are actually kicking in. Not very well done. I think I could certainly use some improvement there. But all the other driver inputs are pretty good. So you have nice, accurate steering. It's nicely weighted, not overly heavy, not too light. I think it's very appropriate for a vehicle like this. Throttle response is also very immediate, of course, being electric, and there isn't too much travel there, thankfully. So even whenever I tip into the pedal just a little bit, I get a nice response out of it. It's not overboard though either. Some other EVs really try and ramp it up really fast. This is nice and smooth, and I think it's actually really well done as far as throttle response goes. Other things you really appreciate is, of course, the quietness, being not only electric, but also being pretty well insulated here. I've been pretty impressed. It's, definitely one of the quieter EVs, I think, in this segment, and it's been really nice and smooth in that regard. It's also pretty smooth for the ride. We don't have any kind of advanced dampers or anything. It's just a simple, coil spring setup. And I have noticed that it seems like there's not a ton of suspension travel, because if I go into a bump that's a little too big, it's really like jarring, and then, the minor stuff it soaks up pretty well. So it's kind of interesting. It just seems like there's not a whole lot of forgiveness there with the suspension. And so I just found myself actually feeling like the ride was a little rough on some of the imperfect roads here in Pittsburgh during my week, and I actually just wasn't super impressed with the ride quality, to be totally honest. But I'll talk more about that here as we get out and do some faster driving. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode, and it doesn't change anything aside from telling you that you are in the sport mode. Let's turn down onto this pack right here and see how it does. Here we go. Okay, so ramps up pretty nicely, and really seems to pull in the higher RPMs, or not higher RPMs, but higher speeds there. And when the power meter says it's getting up to 100%, where it really starts to give you more. And it's very immediate whenever, throttle response definitely ramps up a lot faster, and you get that fake sound, which sounds okay as far as fake EV sounds goes. Not the coolest out there, but not the worst either. But it is pretty punchy. So all total, you have 389 horsepower, 442 pound-feet of torque, and a 5-second 0 to 60 here for the all-wheel drive versions. If you go for the front-wheel drive version, you go down to 238 horsepower. And also, if you go to the base version of this, you get like 335 horsepower. But everything aside from the base all-wheel drive one gets the 389 and the 442 pound-feet of torque. And it is really punchy. I think actually it felt a little less impressive off the line, but once you're up and rolling at some higher speeds, that's where it really piles on the speed really quickly and does feel very, very impressive. But a 5 seconds 0 to 60 is very mid-pack for the all-wheel drive electric crossovers in this segment, so it's not going to really be much faster than most of them. There's a few others that have a little less horsepower, but you know, it's, I'd say comfortably mid-pack, but you know, still very impressive performance nonetheless. And on this rougher road now that we're on, that usually generates some more road noise, not too bad either. But we're coming up some corners here I always take, and let's see how the Ariya handles on these 20-inch wheels. They're running these all-season tires, nothing super sporty, but it's pretty flat for the handling. I think the thing that's been a disconnect for me during the week, I wasn't overly impressed with the handling in my week here, and the main reason why is the steering feels a little slow, so it doesn't feel very agile or like it really wants to dive in. It feels like it's almost resisting changing direction a little bit, like it's like, oh, fine, you want to turn, okay, let's go. And you know, it just doesn't feel very exciting with the handling. I mean, it's flat, and you know, for something this is almost 5,100 pounds, doesn't feel bad. They're 255 wide tires, a decent amount of grip. I haven't had any complaints with grip this week, but it's just, you know, I think I've had to recalibrate my brain because, again, I got to turn the wheel a lot more, and then I got to put my foot way into the brake pedal a lot more in order to, you know, give me the slowing power that I'm looking for. And so the whole experience just doesn't feel very natural and very gratifying, to be honest. And I'd say, as far as, you know, vehicles in this segment goes, you know, it's one of the less impressive ones out there. I think it's, you know, kind of vanilla, similar to the Volkswagen ID4, which also didn't really impress me too much with its handling. I think the Mach-E certainly feels more exciting. I haven't driven a Model Y, but Mach-E, Ioniq 5, and EV6, those all handle much more excitingly than this does, and are, you know, a lot more fun with their more rear biased rear motors, and those things actually do a little bit of tail happy antics. This doesn't seem to really want to do much of that. It's very safe, very conservative with the handling setup, I think, and that's okay. Again, I'm not going to review this like a sports car, because it's really not, but you know, if you're going into this thinking that it's going to be just as sporty with the handling as it is with the power, that's not the case. I'd say it's certainly, you know, power heavy. Handling is sufficient, brakes are sufficient, but you know, it doesn't feel quite as sporty as the acceleration does. Other things to mention here about the Ariya are that the visibility is great. You have a nice large windshield, good view out of the sides, view out of the back is pretty good, but if it's not as good as you would like it to be, there's a digital camera rearview mirror here, and so that gets rid of any obstructions there and gives you a nice clear view. And so really good as far as that goes. There's also the 360 cameras here on these upper trims, so that's going to, you know, enable you to do all the tight parking you need to do. It also does have automatic parking. If you want to take your time and have it figure that out, it can do that for you automatically as well. And it is really nice that, you know, that's offered, and I believe that's again here on these upper trims. But the other big thing to talk about here is the battery pack here. So there's a 63 kilowatt hour battery in the base versions, and that'll only give you 205 miles of range, but most of the vehicles, you know, all the upper trims and stuff, are gonna have this 87 kilowatt hour battery pack. That'll give you between 267 miles and 272 miles of range. This one with the 20-inch wheels and the top trim is going to be 267 miles of range, and that's, you know, kind of mid-pack. A lot of the others do more miles than this does, but it's not far off. The one thing that is a little bit disappointing, though, in combination with that, is the charge rate. So it only charges at a max speed of 130 kilowatts, and that is slower than basically everything else aside from the Toyota bZ4X, which is the king of slow charging, unfortunately, and only does 100 kilowatt charging with its all-wheel drive version. So 130, and actually the bZ4X, if you go for front-wheel drive, will do 150. So this is actually slower and will be the slowest whenever you're going for the front-wheel drive version of this. But anyway, 130 kilowatts, it's about 20 behind the Mach-E. That'll do 150, as will the ID4. The Model Y does even faster than that, as does the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the EV6, which all charge way faster than the competitors. So the Hyundai and the Kia and the Tesla are going to be the top ones from a charging standpoint there. So, you know, I'd say this is going to kind of be relegated to the same realm as the bZ4X, where if you don't do a lot of road tripping, you know, it's probably going to be okay. If you're not in a hurry on road trips, it's probably going to be okay. Otherwise, though, I would highly recommend going for one of the faster charging ones if you do plan to do some road trips here. But now we're on the highway here in the Ariya, and I do have the adaptive cruise control system on, and it also does have the Pro Pilot Assist 2.0, which is a hands-free system, and so it combines on certain highways that are mapped out, it'll do the hands-free driving, which is something that only the Mach-E can match currently. unless you're going for like a Cadillac Lyriq, which does, I think, come in around a similar price point for at least the lower versions, and that'll offer Super Cruise. But aside from that, this is really one of the only ones that do the hands-free thing. Unfortunately, on this highway currently, it is not letting me do the hands-free thing. So I'm not sure why, but we'll see how the steering assist works nonetheless going around this corner, with me just letting it do most of the steering for me here. And it's doing pretty good with the assistance here. Nissan system has typically been one of the better ones in my experience as far as doing steering assist. I don't know why. I mean, we are approaching a construction zone, so maybe it knows that it's not letting me do the hands-free thing for that reason. I'm not sure, but I really wish I could try it out, but haven't been able to try it out yet this week, so I can't really give any comments on the hands-free thing. But potentially it will do it in the right circumstances on the right roads that are mapped, and they have a map on their website for where you can actually do that, so you'll want to check that out to see if you can actually use it on roads near you. But a nice thing to have. Nice they offer that again, since most of the other competitors don't. And the adaptive cruise system otherwise works really great. You also have all the usual safety tech as standard, so you have blind spot monitoring, automatic emergency braking, and rear cross traffic alert, all those types of things here as standard. Although it is important to note though that the adaptive cruise system is not standard, and that is something that a lot of other companies do make standard, and unfortunately that is something that is reserved for these higher trims here. So depending on how well it is going to work in your area, that may or may not be a selling point of this top one, because I believe it is only in like the top 1 or 2 trims. But nice to have again that offered nonetheless. This system will also do assisted lane changes, but it's hands-on lane changes, so it's not really that great because you still have to be doing the lane change yourself essentially, and it's not very impressive. The Mach-E with its newest software update will actually do automated lane changes, as will the Super Cruise system from Cadillac. So that's going to be the more advanced system still if you are looking for the best hands-free experience. But the last few things to mention here are my efficiency and the pricing and how it compares to its competition. So first off, as far as efficiency goes, interestingly, the EPA hasn't rated the all-wheel drive version as far as an MPGe rating, so I can't share what that is, but what I can say here is that my observed miles per kilowatt hour here was pretty efficient if the trip computer is accurate, because it was showing me previously between like I think 3.3 to 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour, which is very impressive if that is in fact accurate. But then I plugged it in to charge, and it always resets every time you plug it in to do a new charge, and now it's telling me only getting 2.1 miles per kilowatt hour, which doesn't seem to be accurate and seems way too low. So that seems a little glitchy. I really don't want to trust either of those numbers, considering it doesn't seem to be consistent. So your guess is as good as mine. I would assume that first reading was probably the most accurate, so I'd like to think this would get around somewhere in the mid-3s as far as the miles per kilowatt hour, which would put it right in line with the efficiency of like what I've seen in the Mach-E and the ID4 and vehicles like that. So that's what I'm assuming is the efficiency, but it's really hard to say. And I know Car and Driver, for example, on their highway loop, in one of these all-wheel drive ones, only managed to get like 210 miles of range before they had to charge. So, just keep in mind, again, don't buy one of these, I think, if you want to do a lot of road trips as far as having a ton of range and a fast charging speed, because it just doesn't seem to be this vehicle's strong suit. But then the last thing to mention here is the pricing and how it compares to its competition. And that is another tough sell here, I think, in a lot of ways. So these do start around $45,000 for the base front-wheel drive version, and then going up to the all-wheel drive, tax on some extra money, and then this one, again, as tested, fully loaded, is $62,770. And at that price point, it is above all of its competitors as far as maxed out trims goes. It's really impressive that they actually got it that high, because it just doesn't seem very competitive at this price point. Because first off, we'll talk about the biggest competitor, I think, and the one that is currently priced the best is the Tesla Model Y. Now, Tesla changes their pricing every week, basically, so it's hard to say, in the future, but as far as June of 2023 here, you can get a Model Y with the same 0 to 60 time, with more range, and, most of the same features here for between $49,000 if you don't need the advanced autopilot thing, up to about $55,000, even with their enhanced autopilot, which does do lane changes, but it's still a hands-on system. That is, still going to come in like $7 grand cheaper than this, plus that's eligible for the federal tax credit, which this is not. This is built in Japan, so you get no tax credit with this. You get the full $7,500 with the Tesla, which then makes that gap, nearly $15,000 if you are eligible for that tax credit between this and a Model Y. To me, that's game over. Like, I don't know there's no way I could recommend this unless you must have Apple CarPlay integration and you must have gauges in front of you, or cooled seats, or the closing moonroof. If some of those few things justify that enormous price jump to you, then go for it. But otherwise, it's just really hard to argue against the Tesla Model Y currently, the way it's priced and with the tax advantage it has. So that's really the toughest one. The other one that does get a tax credit, if you are interested, that does undercut this slightly, is the Mustang Mach-E. That with all-wheel drive does give you more range, and that also still has the smartphone integration, still has gauges, just does not have the closing moonroof there, but you know, has very similar amounts of power and all that, and that has the superior Blue Cruise system, which will do the hands-free stuff. I've tested that extensively on a road trip in our own Mach-E. Full disclosure, we own a Mach-E, so maybe I'm biased, but they have gone up in price. $61,000 was what they cost now. Still undercuts this just a little bit, but you lose cooled seats, but that does get a frunk, like the Model Y also gives you a frunk, which this does not have. You know, but you have the cooled seats there, which the Mach-E doesn't have. So there's some trade-offs there for sure. It just comes down to which features you prioritize the most. But again, Mach-E still, even with what I think is an inflated price these days, still comes in under this with its fully loaded version amazingly. And then if you know you don't care about having a tax credit, then there's also some better values as far as like you can get a Kia EV6 for $59,000 fully loaded, which has that much faster charging rate. It's wired in CarPlay, but it still does have that smartphone integration, and that's another one that's, you know, definitely worth considering. And I even like the Hyundai Ioniq 5 a little bit better, and that for a limited one is $55,000 with all-wheel drive. Has a little bit less horsepower, but still a similar 0 to 60 time. Very cool, very funky with its styling, and very concept car-like with its styling as well. And $55,000, again, having way faster charging, and that is going to be much better for road trips. Gets better range than this does too. There's also the Volkswagen ID4, which comes in at $57,000. That is, I believe, eligible for at least a partial tax credit since it is built in the US now. And so, you know, that's another one that's, you know, worth considering. Does have many of the same features as this. There are a few things that are annoying about the ID4 as well. It's certainly not perfect, but that is another one that's worth considering that, again, does undercut this if you are looking for the best value. I think the Volkswagen is probably a slightly better value as well. And then last but not least, in some cases, is the Toyota BZ4X. Now, if you're someone who doesn't need to have a ton of horsepower, but you still want all-wheel drive traction and that stability in the wintertime and stuff, it's only 214 horsepower, but you do get all-wheel drive with the Toyota BZ4X, and that for a fully loaded one comes in at about $51,000, so way less than this. Gives you that all-wheel drive safety and stability, and again, as long as you're okay with not having a ton of range, I believe those are like 220 miles of range, as long as you're okay with the slow charging of, again, 100 kilowatts, or the front-wheel drive version comes in even less. That's under $50,000, and is very, very competitive. It does the 150 kilowatt charging in that one, so that's definitely, you know, more competitive. And anyway, just worth noting, if you don't need to have your face ripped off every time you floor it, BZ4X is a great choice if you can live with the slow charging. So, you know, like I said, there's a lot of other options out there, and I think most of them are pretty compelling depending on, again, what your priorities are, but I just feel like this being the top priced one doesn't make sense. Yes, it has a lot of nice features, and there are some really cool things about this, but at this price point, it's just hard to justify. You know, if it was $5 cheaper, it'd be right mid-pack pricing wise. I could see it making a little more sense. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Ariya. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Nissan for providing me here with this Ariya to review for you guys today. And yeah, please also leave a like, comment, and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.